Many of the 600 striking miners from the two pits met at Singleton Showground this morning to discuss return-to-work proposals. Some of the men have been off work for almost 3 weeks in protest over the mine owners' attempts to change work practices. They say both BP and Warkworth management have been seeking arbitration on award issues, which should only be changed through negotiations at a national level. One of the changes Warkworth wishes to introduce is round-the-clock operation, a move the unions say is the same as enforced overtime. John Thorley of the FEDFA says the breakthrough in the dispute came when owners of both collieries agreed on Friday to withdraw their appeals from the Coal Industry Tribunal.
As a result of the withdrawal of those applications, there has been a recommendation put for a resumption of work. That recommendation's been accepted. There'll be a resumption, and endorsement for that decision will be sought from the aggregate meeting.
All pits in the Northern District will stop for the aggregate meeting at Branxton tomorrow. Union officials believe the meeting will endorse the return-to-work decision. The miners say there are still many specific issues which need to be decided on a mine-to-mine basis, but are prepared to work while negotiations continue.
We're now in a position to conduct national negotiations with the owners, something that we've been unable to do now for many months. In recent times, the New South Wales coal owners have sought to do their own thing, Warkworth and BP in particular. But because of the fact that that's already led to a 48-hour national stoppage and the situation's rapidly becoming out of control with the potential for more national action, it's been seen that it's time the parties got together and talked about it, and it's hoped that those national negotiations will commence shortly.
So you feel you've really won a major battle here?
Local singer Ken Gardner spent many years touring the club circuit in the Hunter Valley and has long planned to put out a record. The Bicentennial provided him with the perfect opportunity.
Farewell to old England forever. Farewell to my rum calls as well. Farewell to the well-known Old Bailey, where I once used to cut such a swell. Singing
the result is a tape called Ken Gardner, Proudly Australian, which is a collection of Australia's most loved traditional songs. They range from Waltzing Matilda and the Wild Colonial Boy to more modern songs such as I Still Call Australia Home and Santa Never Made It Into Darwin. Ken says very few records or tapes have been put together for the Bicentennial, and those that are out sound dated.
I thought of producing a song with more of the Australian attitude, not hawker attitude, with the normal Australian speech, the normal attitude of Australians, and something with an Australian flavour but with more emotion, more feeling, a softer and a warm sound.
What sort of a market do you think you're going to have?
Well, I think it'll cover most of the Australian public. We're looking at the 30s, 40s, 50-year-olds, and also I think even in schools it should be something for the young ones to learn the Aussie songs and learn the words so that they know the songs and listen to the proper melody of the songs and hear them properly.
Good afternoon, viewers. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk down to you all and to say that I think it would be an excellent idea if you look in tonight in the NBN News and listen to that delightful man Ray. I really could do with someone like that in my cabinet. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Until last weekend, Hunter Valley winemakers say conditions had been near perfect and a record season was expected. Now, however, the future is not so certain. The harvest, which began 3 weeks ago, is only half over, but in some places this week came to a standstill. Parts of Petal have received more than 70 millimetres of rain since Saturday, turning fields into quaglines and stopping the use of machine harvesters. Torres is one of the biggest of the more than 20 wineries in the area, but has been less affected than most. Tyrrell's differs from many vineyards in that the grape types were planted relatively close together. For this reason, harvesters are uneconomical and most picking is still done the traditional way, by hand. Hand pickers can work in areas made inaccessible to machines, and so many vignerons, like Bruce Tyrrell, have employed more crews to bring in the crop as quickly as possible. Mr Tyrrell says the next few days will be crucial.
If we can get some sunshine now and basically fine weather, then we've got no real problems. If it keeps raining for the next 10 days or fortnight, then we're going to be in major problems.
Mr Tyrrell says the greatest danger now is that mould will form in the bunches.
Starting to see some mould about the district, and basically what's happened with the rain is the berries swell up, those that are inside the bunch will split, and then that juice is running out and it goes mouldy, and you start to get the rot then in the vine. And if you get too much of that, you end up with a dirty, rotten, mouldy character in the wine.
But if the weather is kind, Mr Tyrrell still believes this season has the potential to be one of the best ever.
Yeah, the wine we've made so far, and we've nearly got half the crop off. Whites particularly are absolutely outstanding. I don't think we've made whites as good as these since probably 67 or 76.
And would you say that's the case around the valley?
I would think so. Anyone who's looked after their vineyard properly, and that's really what this year will be all about. The good viticulturalists are going to make good wine, and those that haven't looked after their vineyard and cut corners are the ones that are going to be in real trouble.
Why is that going to come about this year? Why are you going to notice that this year?
Well, really in the wet season, or just with the mould control. Here you can see under the vines it's nice and clean. There's no grass. The vines have been cut and topped back. So when we get a bit of breeze when the rain's over, the breeze can come through, it's drying the vines out, and there's no humidity. And humidity really is what causes your rot problems.
Mr Tyrrell says the industry's future in the valley is bright and it can expect to grow.
This area can only go ahead as long as we plant the right varieties, look after our vineyards properly, and don't do anything silly in the winery. There's a tremendous market within Australia, but more importantly now overseas. The wines of this area are really accepted in the international market as being of international quality.
Is there room for many more growers in the area?
Oh, I think there's still room for a lot of expansion, as long as the expansion's on the right soil. We've seen over the years some vineyards planted in the wrong places. And as we were saying before, you've great wines made here in the vineyard. And if it's not on the right soil, well, then you're not going to get that great wine. But there's still enough good country about here to get some reasonable expansion out of the district.
What sort of cut? Mr Tyrrell says hunter wines will be even more desirable this year, following a disastrous season for grape growers in South Australia. The prime grape areas of Barossa and Crown hit by hail last year, and Coonawarra by frost. Mr Tyrrell estimates their harvest will be down by 50%, and grape prices consequently inflated. He says the flow-on effect will mean consumers can expect to see major price increases on table wine this year.
The Mayor received official confirmation of the grant at midday, although media groups were notified early this morning. Alderman Welsh says this in itself is an insult, but worse is the amount of the grant. He says $500,000 to upgrade the Swansea Caves beach, including regrassing, parking lots and landscaping, is an insignificant amount, especially compared to grants going to similar cities.
I'm not surprised that it's so small. The people who came up to discuss it with us in the first place were, frankly, they insulted the city at the time, and I accepted that purely on the basis that we were trying to get the $1 million for the city, and this to come along as an insult to me and to the city.
The Mayor says the suggestion that the money be on a dollar-for-dollar basis with Council is surprising, since Council wasn't sure if it wanted to take on the project in the first place, even assuming a grant was forthcoming.
It represents a problem in that there's been no money set aside in the budget for it. In actual fact, we were advised that we went to the bottom of the list and had to vie with many other projects through the state, so it was assumed that we didn't have the funding, so no funds were set aside in the budget. Now the Budget Committee will have to meet and set those funds aside.
Member for Swansea Don Bowman announced the grant, saying Swansea headland, extensive open space at Hams Beach and adjacent areas would be transformed into a series of ocean parks, removing scars caused by sand mining and restoring natural vegetation. On top of the $500,000 grant, $75,000 has been approved for a marine study centre adjoining the ocean parks. The centre would support research into marine habitats and environmental education.
The Maritime Museum was established in 1972 and has grown to be one of the most complete of its type in Australia. It was the result of the vision of three men, Captain Ken Hopper, Captain Jim Fletcher and Bert Lovell. Aptly, the three were together again for the last official day for founding President Captain Hopper. Captain Hopper says the museum now houses more than $2 million worth of historic displays, mostly obtained through donations. He says it is something all Novocastrians should be proud of.
I don't think you would have got the Regional Museum if we hadn't made a success of the Maritime Museum. And I think something should have been done 100 years ago. And the artefacts we've been able to collect in that last 15 or 16 years is really something that records the major history of Newcastle and this district.
Captain Hopper retired from his position as Harbour Master 8 years ago and says this second retirement is merely another change of direction.
Well, I joined them. Strangely enough, I've had family and even the captain of Brisbane here. He looked through my record during the war and pre-war. I have a lot of records of even the Bicentennial and that sort of thing. And he wants me to record all this. So my family say, they've given me a tape recorder and said, here, Dad, go and record your life and let's see what it all sounds about. So I'll have that.
The $1.2 million hatchery is situated at the brackish water fish culture research station near Taylor's Beach. A team of dedicated scientists has been working with local farmers, developing new techniques for the farming of Sydney rock oysters, free from contamination by the Pacific oyster species, which has recently plagued the waters of Port Stephens. In the past, local farmers have had to catch oyster spat in the wild. But with new technology underway at the hatchery, the alternative lies in selective breeding.
Here we will breed pure oyster spat artificially for distribution, and we'll be able to improve the size of oysters by genetic selection, very much in the way we'll be able to improve the size of our merino sheep very dramatically over the past 40 or 50 years.
Local, state and federal politicians were included in the guest list at today's official ceremony, which opened the doors to the new hatchery regarded as the most advanced in Australia. A special task force has been set up to ensure the growth of the state's $20 million oyster industry.
Well, the idea of the task force is to have representatives of the oyster industry, our scientists and people in the Department of Agriculture to work together to evolve policies rather than reacting to problems after they've arisen.
The Salvation Army has been aware of an urgent need for emergency accommodation for women in Newcastle, but hadn't been able to find a suitable building. The former Glasgow Arms Hotel turned out to be just the ticket. It could be the first time the Australian Salvation Army has turned a hotel into a hostel. Captain Mavis Stevens says a growing number of women over 16 years of age are looking for emergency shelter.
It is worsening, but the situations that women find themselves in for this service is unemployment, just general homelessness and the financial situation as it is in the community today. Plus the alcoholism and drug addiction and domestic violence, those things contribute to women being homeless today.
Commissioner Roy Lovett, Territorial Commander for Australia, Eastern and Papua New Guinea, officially opened Pulo Court, named after Brigadier Esling, who already began her work in Newcastle in 1914. Purchase, refurbishment and furnishing of the Glasgow Arms has cost almost $290,000, and all the money has been raised through the Red Shield appeal. The hostel opens its doors to those in need at the end of the week. It's a party here, everybody can look to it.
Hart had the lead. Oh, there's a Formula 500 in trouble, and there's one right up onto the wall. Almost wiped the flag man out over there. Is that one going?
From Queensland, South Australia, the ACT and New South Wales contesting the championships.
Slowing right down.
In the end, it was a race between Baxter and former champion Lloyd Crawley, who had the race won until his chain broke only a couple of laps from home.
Newcastle's
Brad Cameron was third.
Down the back straight away for the last time. The New South Wales champ, Jeff Russell, will come down and he will take the checkered flag. Jeff Russell is first. Second place goes to Lismore 9, Steve Robinson.
There's nothing nicer than a dozen red roses, and Peter Holliday, owner of Rose Farm at Port Stephens, has been capitalising on that fact for many years. So when his wife saw a recipe in the Woman's Weekly for rose jam and suggested that they make some, he was not all that keen. However, she persisted and they went ahead with the idea, selling small batches of the jam from their farm. But now Peter has found that his product has a massive export potential. He says Austrade put him in touch with overseas markets, and he's now busy organising finer details such as packaging.
Mr. Lincoln Rose is so well adapted to the rose petal jam production. We started to look around for markets domestically and found that there were enormous markets here. And I said, well, if there's markets here, we'll venture overseas. And with the assistance of Austrade, we've found markets, excellent markets in Hong Kong, Switzerland, Holland and England.
He's now faced with the quite daunting task of producing as many Mr. Lincoln roses as possible.
Next step now is to build a great big glass house to grow better cut flowers or roses for the market and turn all of our 80,000 rose plants now into jam.
Artists accepted invitations to exhibit in the Show Association's $10,000 art purchase. Judges, Newcastle Gallery Director David Bradshaw and Federal Parliament Art Curator Katrina Rumley say they agreed completely on the choice of the final four. Among the successful artists, Newcastle painter Ed Rush, with this dynamic work driving Hank home. Also selected Susie Marston's Oil on Canvas, The Ballroom Dancer. Beyond and Beginning by Janet Lawrence also met with the judges' approval, as did the fourth work in the selection, Miracle by Peter Ellis. David Bradshaw says there was a broad criterion for being invited to exhibit, and that was that the artists were generally up-and-coming talents in their 30s.
Well, I think, as Katrina said, I think the works will fit into the collection very well, and they're fairly diverse works too. I mean, it also represents what I think a fairly important, perhaps new or emerging group of artists are concerned with.
After last night's official opening, the works will remain on public exhibition until March 13.
When you have to invite the artist, I mean, does it...
There are only 14 places available in the course. The number of applicants will exceed that number by tenfold. Yesterday, 55 women attended the first seminar at Burrigal. 108 women attended today's meeting at Hamilton, and tomorrow's seminar at Maitland is expected to attract many more. The 39-week course is a mixture of TAFE classes and on-the-job work experience, with the applicants being paid appropriate award wages while they are learning. The department has made $220,000 available for the scheme, but the limited number of places means many women will be disappointed. Special consideration will be given to women who are considered to be disadvantaged, for example, women from non-English speaking backgrounds. They must also be over 35 years of age and have already tried to find a job.
Alderman Ashley Saunders' successful motion last night was that Council acknowledged that brothels are operating within Newcastle and authorised their staff to take action against the operators.
What we've done tonight is to put the owners and operators of these places on notice that we don't want them here, that they're there without our approval, and we simply don't want them. It's as simple as that.
Not quite that simple, according to Lord Mayor John McNaughton. He says council officers will follow the directions of aldermen, but he says the job isn't going to be easy.
No alderman was able to establish that there'd been a complaint about a brothel. There's been a lot of complaints about street prostitution, and the police handle that very well. But we haven't had that I can find, we've had no actual complaints about it.
That's not good enough for Alderman Saunders.
Whether or not Council has received official complaints, I think is irrelevant. The two things that are relevant is firstly that I've received complaints, and I believe other aldermen may have, but quite apart from that, we know there's a problem and let's do something about it, whether we've received complaints or not.
Newcastle has been a crossroads for the nation's wandering entertainers for well over a century. Sideshows, vaudeville acts and circuses all pass through the city, going north to Brisbane, south to Sydney or out into the country. Now the city's Bicentennial Community Committee is paying tribute to those entertainers from the golden age of showtime. This sideshow alley also doubles as memory lane. There are tributes here to many great entertainers in the circus, the sideshow or even the wireless. Newcastle was so good to entertainers that many wandering showfolk came to regard it as their home. An older generation of Novocastrians would remember quite a few, like Arthur Greenhalgh, who bought the Beach Hotel and staffed it with his so-called sideshow freaks during the war's lean years. Or the unforgettable Sawley's Travelling Review show. Owners Bobby and Gracie LeBron finally retired to Newcastle, and the honour of opening this special sideshow went to Gracie, who recalled the warmth of Newcastle audiences.
The Newcastle people, they were always wonderful to us. Bob used to say every year when we were driving in, well, I wonder how they'll treat us this year. And he used to say they never let us down.
In this bicentennial year, when European and Aboriginal Australians are doing some soul searching, an example has been set for the Hunter region by Buladelah High School, where they've just elected their first Aboriginal school captain.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Good afternoon, I'm Belinda Borissow. More people in the Hunter will be treated for cancer and more lives will be saved, following the arrival today of a second linear accelerator at the Mater Hospital. The installation of the accelerator will help make the Hunter Oncology Unit one of the best equipped in Australia.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
News, police are investigating the cause of the third fire in 2 days at a Tighes Hill address. Fire brigades were called to the weatherboard cottage at 3:30 this morning, but could do nothing to save the house, already substantially damaged by a blaze yesterday.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Despite assurances yesterday that supplies of fuel in Newcastle would last another week, panic buying has begun following the midnight introduction of rationing. Some service stations in the Newcastle and Lake Macquarie districts were closed today, while others imposed the maximum $15 limit. Although petrol rationing won't affect the Upper Hunter, Maitland, Cessnock or Port Stephens areas, motorists queued up at those local service stations to fill their tanks, taking advantage of the limited supplies.